There's a series 2 with Combuster. I'm going to start here at the steam inlet. This is where the 12-ounce tailored relief is going to be set to protect against any overpressure. Now our steam is going to come in here. There's a pass plate up top in that condenser, and it's going to push all our steam down and then back up, at which point condensate is going to start dropping out of this tubing. It's 1/2 inch insulated here on the outside. It comes back up, goes over into this condenser. It's going to come down and finish dropping out any condensates that it has, at which point it'll try and exit the unit through this vertical separator. Okay, let's start with our instrument supply. We're going to come in right here, 80 to 100 psi. Now it's going to come in or branch off if it's a dry instrument gas. The reason it needs to be dry, for this side at least, is it's going to be our heater. Now I'll go ahead and explain our heater. It's a short little piece, so we'll come around over to this other side. And we have a pressure regulator. Now it comes factory set at 4.5 water column, and it's going to come out here and go into the back of the safety switch. Now it has instructions on the back of this unit which you can follow, but basically what you're going to do is show up in your vehicle and get some jumper cables and essentially put them on these lugs right here. Now this is going to heat up the element inside of this, and what it says on the back here is 10 to 15 minutes of heating the element up, at which point you can come over here and depress this switch. Now this switch, it doesn't want you holding it down for more than 1 minute. After it gets started, you can check the temperature up front to see if it's rising. If it is rising, you can release and disconnect your battery terminals up here and be done with that. You know you started it. So that's our heater, and that's why it needs to be a dry gas. So we can come back over to this bulkhead and explain where it's going and what it's doing. Now, we come up immediately from this 80 to 100 psi line and branch off. I'm going to go through this pressure regulator first. It's set at 30 psi. Now, this 30 psi is going to come down and go into the second bulkhead. Right here, follow it over to this three-way solenoid. Now, it's waiting here to get signal from this, this board. So, as we're going to start this, now it's not hooked up to any instrument gas supply, so I'll just be walking you through this. When it shows up on site, it's going to be disconnected like this. When you want to fire this thing up for the first time, you're going to connect and you'll hear a relay, and this ball valve will be closed. Now, it's going to start igniting. What you want to do is walk over here while it's igniting, while you hear that, and verify that you do have an arc inside of there. If you have that arc, you can come over here and open up this ball valve. You open up this ball valve, it lets the pilot gas go in. Once this board senses that there's a flame, you'll hear the arc stop. Once it's stopped, I'll just shut it off here. It's not actually going to start up. It's going to tell, the board is going to recognize that flame, and it's going to open this valve. Now, once this valve is open, it's going to send this pressure back. Now, remember, this is at 30 psi. 30 psi, and it's going to come up right here and end the signal. So I'll explain this PGR 30 here in a second, but I'll start where I left off right here. So this is 80 to 100. This is where we branch off to go into our pressure regulator, where we're coming up and it hits another T. Now, this T feeds back to a manual reset, which I'll also explain in a minute. So it's going to come over 80 to 100 and go down and branch off one more time. It's going to come into this oiler, which is 80 to 100, and wait for signal to be applied to this side of the spool. So at 80 to 100 waiting here. So we'll go the other way now. We have 80 to 100 coming in this pressure regulator. It gets turned down to 65 psi. It comes through here and branches off again. I'll also explain this line here in a second. It comes into this CUA and waits for mechanical signal. Once it gets that signal, it's going to pass this signal through at 65 and shift this solenoid. So it shifts, it allows this 100 psi to start pressurizing the blow case. After it pressurizes, the water level or condensate level decreases, it'll lose this signal from the CUA. Okay, and when it loses this signal, because this is a block and bleed valve, it's going to let whatever pressure it has inside of here go through this 1/2 inch tube and vent to atmosphere. Okay, so we can come back over where we left off on this branch. This is 65 coming over and going into our PGR30. Now it has been waiting for signal. This signal is applied when it's trying to start up or when it's running. It'll shut down otherwise. So 65 has been waiting here. It has the signal, it lets it through. This is the pilot line going to the burner. This is middle bulkhead. And it supplies this pressure regulator with 65 psi. And it gets turned down to 5 to 7 psi, which feeds here. So that's when this signal is trying to start up or when it is running. So signal goes through here once it gets its signal here, and this is 65 psi still. And remember, that's coming from this line. It goes into this CUA. This CUA is normally open, so it should always, as long as liquid level doesn't come past here, it should have a signal here. So let's go over to that manual reset on the other side. So we're coming in with our signal 65. Now that's when everything is running operational. We don't have high level liquids. And we're going to branch off of this fitting back here, which is our 80 to 100. You can trace that back. It goes straight to our bulkhead. So 80 to 100 is waiting here, waiting for the manual reset to be pulled. As long as it doesn't have high level liquids, it will hold out on its own and allow this pressure to pass through into this Apollo valve. Now, when it gets this pressure, it's going to take it from its normally open to its normally closed, which will allow you to go to the combustor. So that's our unit in normal operation.